You may not notice it at first. The house looks peaceful enough, a little worn maybe, quiet, tucked behind an old iron gate where the light doesn't quite reach. But there's one thing standing out front. A tree, large, thick, familiar. Its roots crack the path. Its branches cover the doorway. Its leaves fall silently all year long. He planted it with love, but that love placed in the wrong position became a shadow that blocked light, a shadow that dulled movement, a shadow that closed the house's mouth, the very place where breath, luck, and life enter. And for years he didn't know. He just thought he was getting older. That silence was normal. That fatigue was part of age. That the reason no one stayed long, why the air felt thick, why the nights were too quiet was just life. Until one day, someone saw it from the outside. Saw that the door wasn't just blocked by a tree. It was blocked by the past. This is not a story about cutting down memories. It's about gently asking, is what I planted with love now standing in the way of my future? 1. The shadow of love, when a memory blocks the door. He didn't plant the tree to block the house. He planted it because he missed her. The afternoon she was buried, the yard felt too wide, the air too empty. So he walked past the market where saplings sat in cracked pots, and he chose the one that reminded him of her, soft green, slightly curved like her fingers brushing hair behind her ear. He didn't ask the price. He didn't say a word. He dug a hole with trembling hands and planted it where they used to sit together. For a while, the silence felt less heavy. The tree grew quickly as if it wanted to shelter his grief. Its leaves thickened, its roots rose. And with every passing month, it became more than a plant, it became a monument. He stopped noticing how it spread across the yard, how it shaded the whole porch, how it began to block the door. To him, it was still her shadow. Her comfort, but shadows, when they fall over doorways, do not bring peace, they bring pause. What started as remembrance turned into resistance. The wind stopped entering freely. The light thinned, visitors shortened their stays. No one said anything aloud, but people started using the side gate instead. They knocked softly, stayed standing. They left before dusk. The house did not change suddenly. It dulled gradually like a slow fade. The floor stayed swept. The walls stayed upright, but the feeling of openness, of motion, of welcome disappeared. And he thought it was just time, just aging, just how life is after love is gone. He didn't know that in Feng Shui, the front of the home is the mouth, the space where energy, joy, luck, and health enter. He didn't know that when a large tree with deep roots grows directly in front of the door, it blocks not only wind and light, but everything that wants to come in. Family, conversation, even breath. And how could he know? He wasn't seeking prosperity. He was only trying to hold on to what once made him feel alive. But energy doesn't wait for intention, it responds to placement. You can place a loving memory in the wrong place and watch it grow into an obstacle. Not because the memory is wrong, but because it was never meant to take the front seat of the future. That's the quiet danger of grief left unexamined. It wraps around us gently like ivy until one day we realize we can't see out of the windows anymore. And so the tree remained, a sacred thing in the wrong position, a beautiful mistake. He watered it, pruned it, watched the birds come and go. But he never sat under it again, not for long. Because while it carried her memory, it also carried a weight, a stillness that made the air stale. A stillness that whispered, even in daylight, you do not move forward here. None of it was spoken aloud. It lived in the way guests lingered at the edge of the yard, in how the mailman didn't walk up the path anymore, in how even the breeze seemed to hesitate. Sometimes, the things we do to protect ourselves end up becoming the very walls that trap us. It's not wrong to honor the past. But when honoring turns into enshrining, When we turn a memory into a gate that won't open, we begin to lose the life still ahead. That's what the tree had become, a locked gate made of leaves and bark and love, blocking not only his door but his fortune, his health, his connection to the world. When his grandson returned and stood before the canopy, he didn't see a tree. He saw a boundary, a heavy silence. And he understood instantly, it was never about the plant. It was about placement, energy, and breath. And so he asked the only question that truly mattered. Do you think maybe it's time to move it? Not destroy, not cut away. Just let the house breathe again. Because sometimes, the most healing thing we can do for the ones we've loved is make space for light to come back in. Too trapped light, and the invisible mosquitoes of the mind. There's something quiet about a house that doesn't receive light. Not the soft quiet of dawn or the gentle hush of afternoon tea, but the kind that clings to walls, unseen but always there. You don't notice it at first. You think the curtains are just thick, that the days have been overcast lately, that your eyes are just getting used to dimness. Until one morning you walk into the kitchen and flip on the lights even though the sun has already risen. And that becomes your new normal. Somewhere along the way, the sunlight stopped coming in. Maybe it was the tree. Maybe the curtains were never drawn. Maybe you rearranged furniture and didn't realize you blocked a window. Or maybe something inside you stopped reaching for the morning altogether. And the light, sensitive, respectful, patient, didn't force itself in. It simply waited. You begin to live inside that waiting. And slowly your mind forgets what brightness feels like. The rooms feel heavier. The air grows damp. The corners gather dust more quickly than before. You clean, you light incense, you open windows for a moment and then forget to do it again the next day. You call it weather, you call it age. You call it whatever makes it easier not to look directly at the fact that something essential has gone missing. But your body knows. Your breath grows shorter. Your shoulders stay tight. You nap more often but never feel rested. And most of all, a small but constant unease begins to buzz inside your chest. Like a mosquito you can't see. Like something that was once small but is now quietly multiplying. In Feng Shui, this is what happens when light is blocked. The yin energy, cool, still, receptive, gathers too strongly in spaces that need balance. And when there's no yang to meet it, no sunlight, no movement, no laughter, what forms is stagnation. Not just in air, but in thought. It's no coincidence that many people in homes like this describe not feeling like themselves. They forget simple things, they sigh more, they speak less. The house becomes a container for quiet weight, and that weight sinks deeper into the skin with each passing week. But it's hard to notice because it happens slowly, like dust, like humidity, like fatigue. You begin waking up tired, not from dreaming, but from carrying too much darkness in your sleep. In one house, the daughter noticed her mother wiping the same shelf every morning. The cloth was always damp, and yet the dust returned again and again. "This room just never feels fresh," the mother said. The daughter looked up. The window behind the shelf had been nailed shut years ago after a storm. "I just never bothered to open it again." And in that simple sentence, "I never bothered to open it again," lay the root of it all. When we stop inviting light in, we begin to forget what it felt like to live in clarity. And so we compensate. We turn on lamps, we light more candles, we add mirrors, but nothing replaces sunlight. Sunlight is not just illumination, it is movement. It carries warmth, it stirs air, it nourishes the soul of a home. Without it, even the cleanest space feels like a waiting room. Silent, suspended. In homes where light is blocked, arguments linger longer, thoughts loop in the mind, rest becomes shallow, and things physical and emotional pile up. It's not superstition, It's flow. When energy doesn't move, neither do we. And yet healing begins in the smallest action. One woman living alone after her husband passed had long since let her front curtains stay closed. The neighbors might see in, she'd say. But one day while sweeping, she noticed a single beam of light catching dust in midair. It looked like floating silk. She stood still, watching. Then, almost without thinking, she drew back the curtain fully. The sunlight spilled in. For the first time in years, the floor shone. That night, she slept without dreams, just breath. Sometimes, all it takes is letting one square of light fall where it hasn't touched in a long time. We think our fatigue is personal, our sadness internal, but many times it's architectural, energetic. We don't realize we're living inside structures that quietly feed the fog in our minds. And just like a room with standing water grows mosquitoes, a mind left too long in dimness grows worries that have no source. They hover, they hum. They bite in the smallest ways: forgetfulness, irritability, isolation. And so we must remember, light isn't just beauty, it's medicine. And allowing it in is not about luxury or aesthetics, it's about restoring rhythm. If your home no longer glows in the morning, don't wait for a full renovation. Start with what's already there. A window you forgot, a curtain you can tie up, a door you haven't opened since winter. Then wipe the glass. Not because it's dirty, but because the light deserves a clear path, and so do you. 3. No wind, no laughter when energy stops at the gate. The sound of laughter used to rise from the porch like steam from a warm cup of tea. Not loud, but steady, familiar. The kind of joy that doesn't try to announce itself, just lives in the background. A door opening, footsteps on dry leaves, the clink of porcelain in gentle conversation. But one day, without anyone noticing, the laughter stopped arriving. No argument chased it away. No storm silenced it. It just faded. And in its place came a stillness that looked like peace but didn't feel like it. The wind had stopped visiting, too. You begin to notice it not in gusts, but in what's missing. The curtain no longer sways. The wind chime hangs mute, its strings limp in the air. Even the leaves outside seem to rustle only in the distance. Not here, not near your door. You tell yourself it's seasonal, that perhaps the house is simply shielded. But something deeper inside knows the air doesn't circulate here anymore. In Feng Shui, wind is not just weather. It is energy in motion, breath in motion. Wherever wind flows, life flows. And when wind stops at the gate, when it hesitates, curls back, or becomes trapped, the home begins to still in unnatural ways. There's no storm, no visible barrier, but life doesn't knock anymore. You see it in how guests shorten their stays, how conversations flatten after just a few minutes, how friends begin calling instead of coming by. No one says it out loud, but something about the space makes them want to keep moving, as if the house itself asks them not to linger. And slowly the home becomes a sealed box, tidy, cared for but disconnected. A place where birthdays are texted, not celebrated, where the laughter of children echoes in memory, not reality. It's easy to think it's just time, that people grow busy, that silence is what happens when we age. But the wind knows otherwise. Homes breathe through doors, through open pathways, through the gentle exchange between inside and out. And when a tree, no matter how beautiful, is planted directly in front of the main entrance, it does more than shade the doorway. It changes the breath of the house, the flow. When that flow is blocked, joy doesn't arrive as easily. Voices don't rise as naturally. A subtle resistance builds in the air, a reluctance to speak, to stay, to play. And yet no one talks about it. Because how do you explain that the house feels full and empty at the same time? That visitors always sit by the edge of the chair, glancing at the clock a little too often. That meal's taste just a little less flavorful, though the recipe hasn't changed. This isn't superstition, it's space, movement, the invisible architecture of energy. In one home, an elder woman noticed her daughter, once so vibrant, becoming quiet during visits. "She barely laughs now," the mother said, "even when I try to tell the stories she loved." But her daughter wasn't distant. She was subdued by something she couldn't name. The house had grown too still, too closed. And so even joy began to lower its voice, unsure of its welcome. When the wind cannot enter freely, neither can emotion. Neither can memory in motion. And so it is that laughter which once danced on the porch begins to live only in old photos. But not all is lost, because just as the wind withdraws, it can also be invited back. It doesn't take grand gestures. The shift begins with one gentle change, like clearing the front path of overgrown leaves. Like removing that decorative shelf that unintentionally blocked the entrance. Like trimming just enough of the tree canopy so that the air can remember how to move again. In one home, the owner hung a small wind chime, not as decoration, but as invitation. The first morning it sang, it startled her. She had forgotten how the sound felt, not just audible, but physical. The space responded. She noticed herself humming while folding clothes, cooking slowly again. Opening windows without reason. The home remembered how to respond, because laughter doesn't return by force. It returns through permission. Permission begins when you make room for breeze, for conversation, for new energy to arrive unannounced. The gate is not just a boundary between outside and in. It is the handshake between your home and the world. When it is closed, not physically, but energetically, everything slows. And when it is opened with care, everything flows. So if your house has grown quiet, if voices sound small, if silence feels thick, step outside your front door. Don't ask what's wrong, ask what's missing. Is it wind? Is it movement? Is it the easy rhythm that once carried music through the hall? Sometimes all it takes is a breath, one intentional breath offered to space. Walk the path from your gate to your front door as if you are walking with an old friend. Notice what greets you, what blocks you, what welcomes you, and then clear the way. Not because something is wrong, but because joy, like wind, only enters when we make space for it to arrive. 4, not just aging. It's your house growing tired with you. It begins subtly. You wake up earlier but feel like you've slept less. The joints are stiffer. The breath is shorter. The mornings arrive but bring no eagerness. You chalk it up to age, to weather, to the natural slowing down that comes with time. But one morning, as you sit on the edge of the bed looking toward the dim hallway, you realize it's not just you that's tired. The house feels it too. The walls, once warm with morning light, are now shadowed. The floors, which used to echo with footsteps, now absorb every sound. Even the teacups on the shelf seem to sit heavier, quieter, as if they've stopped waiting for conversation. This fatigue is not yours alone. In Feng Shui, a home is not a backdrop. It is a living extension of your energy field. It breathes when you breathe. It declines when you decline. It is both mirror and partner. And when its energy is blocked, yours begins to fade too. You may start forgetting things, not because of memory, but because there's nowhere fresh for thoughts to land. You may feel restless, but don't want to go anywhere. You may sigh often, not from sadness, but from trying to clear invisible weight. This isn't just the passing of time. It's the weight of stillness. Energy, like blood, must circulate. And when your house loses its circulation, when doors remain closed too often, when light never reaches the inner rooms, when the air never stirs, your own circulation suffers too. There's a reason why temples open their doors each morning, no matter how still the prayer inside. Movement keeps space alive. But in so many homes, especially those holding quiet grief or long solitude, that movement stops. Not by choice, but by habit, and the house begins to grow old in spirit. It doesn't show in the paint. It shows in the silence that stretches too long, in the places you no longer clean with intention, in the rooms that you pass through without looking anymore. There's a name for this in energy work: house fatigue, a dulling of space that reflects a dulling of spirit. And yet it can be healed, not by renovating, not by replacing furniture, but by reconnecting. Begin by noticing which part of your home feels the most lifeless, the room you used to love but now avoid, the corner that collects dust faster than the rest, the chair that once held you gently but now feels distant. Go there, not with judgment, with presence. Sit down, breathe, listen. You may be surprised to find that the space has been waiting for you. In one home, an elderly woman noticed her favorite reading nook no longer felt right. She hadn't used it in months. "It's too cold there now," she said. But when her daughter visited and opened the window just a crack, a breeze lifted the curtain and sunlight fell on the cushion. "Oh," the woman whispered, as if remembering something, "it's still here." The house had not changed, but it had grown quiet, waiting for touch. When we stop tending to space, it does not resent us. It rests, it waits. But its waiting has weight. We think of homes as containers, but they are more than that. They are participants in our energy. When they receive no breath, they begin to suffocate gently, just enough to affect sleep, appetite, even mood. You may have noticed it. Food tastes a little duller. Music feels too loud. You want to sit, but nowhere feels truly comfortable. These are not signs of aging. They are symptoms of an environment asking for attention. Because healing is not about reversing time. It is about restoring flow. Flow begins with the simplest gesture: opening a window that's long been closed, sweeping a corner with full attention. Sitting in silence, not to fill it, but to acknowledge it. The house will respond. It always does. The air may feel lighter. The scent of old wood may return. The echo of your own footsteps may feel warmer. And most of all, your body will soften. You'll breathe deeper without noticing. You'll wake up not earlier, but more whole. You'll find that the tiredness wasn't just age. It was the quiet consequence of a space left unseen. So walk through your home today, not as its owner, but as its friend. Touch the walls, open a drawer, let light into the bathroom you only use once a day. Say thank you aloud or in silence. Because just as you have held this house for years, it has also been holding you. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to hold each other again. 5. Stillness isn't peace. It's the sound being held back. There's a kind of silence that soothes and a kind that presses. The first makes you close your eyes and exhale. The second makes you hold your breath without knowing why. The house had become the second kind. At first, he called it peace. "It's quiet now," he said, sitting by the porch. "No more chatter, no more noise, no more fuss." But there were no birdsong in the morning, no clatter of spoons in the kitchen, no rustle of curtains swaying in a playful wind. The silence stretched between hours, between footsteps, between conversations that never quite began. And slowly, without alarm, sound disappeared from the home, not in volume, but in spirit. Sound is the first sign that energy is moving. A chime in the breeze, a kettle boiling, a soft footstep echoing through a clean hallway. These are not just noises, they are life signals. A home alive has rhythm. And when that rhythm fades, what's left isn't peace, it's pause. In Feng Shui, sound activates space, not just to chase away bad energy, but to stir awake corners that have fallen asleep. Homes, like hearts, need gentle tapping to stay alert. When sound is absent too long, stagnation begins. It doesn't arrive loudly. It comes in whispers, hesitation to speak, the shrinking of laughter, the shrinking of voice itself. You begin to speak less, not because there's nothing to say, but because the air doesn't seem to carry it. You play music, but lower the volume. You pick up the phone, but decide to text instead. Over time, your own sound begins to recede. Even thoughts feel quieter, more unsure, like a conversation left halfway in the throat. Stillness is sacred when chosen, but when imposed, it becomes a form of forgetting. He didn't notice it until his grandson arrived and asked, "Where's your wind chime, Grandpa?" He blinked. "It broke 2 winters ago," he replied. "Haven't needed it since." But something about that sentence felt strange to his own ears. Haven't needed it since what? Since the house stopped asking. That night, lying in bed, he realized he hadn't heard the house breathe in a long time. No creak of the wood under temperature change. No hum of the wind outside pushing gently on shutters. Even the trees seemed still. It wasn't silence, it was suppression. And it began to dawn on him, perhaps the house hadn't stopped singing. Perhaps he had stopped listening. We often confuse quiet with calm. But a house that holds no sound is not resting, it's waiting. Waiting for someone to speak to it again. The next morning, he walked to the front of the house and stood under the eaves. The hook where the chime once hung was still there, a little rusted, like a forgotten earring. He touched it. It felt colder than he remembered, but he didn't pull his hand away. Instead, he whispered, not loud, not clear, just enough to stir the air. "Good morning." The sound barely traveled, but it returned. In that quiet yard, something shifted. A leaf loosened from a branch and fell. The bamboo creaked slightly in the back. The house seemed to lean in. Later that week, his grandson returned with a new chime. Brass, simple, soft, no embellishments. He hung it by the doorframe without ceremony. And when the afternoon breeze finally wandered in, the chime moved just once. It was barely audible, but it was enough. Enough to wake something in the walls, enough to loosen the tightness in his chest. Enough to make him exhale a breath he didn't know he was holding. That night, he hummed while washing the cups. Because sound is not just heard, it is shared. When you make a sound in your home, you are telling it, "I am here with you." And in return, it answers, "Then I will be here too." If your house has gone quiet, not gently but eerily, listen again. Stand in the center of a room, snap your fingers, clap your hands, say your name aloud. What echoes back? If the answer is nothing, if the silence feels too tight, too still, it's time to awaken the sound. Not with noise, with resonance. Hang a bell in the hallway, place a bowl with pebbles near the door. Let shoes clink gently against tile. Let laughter happen even when no one responds. These are not trivial things. They are threads of reanimation. Your voice belongs in your home. So does wind. So does music. So does the hum of a kettle, the page of a book turning, the water running freely. Peace is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of sound in the right places. Let your home remember what it feels like to answer back. 6. The tree isn't wrong, it's just in the wrong place. It's easy to blame the object, the chair that creaks, the photo that makes you pause, the tree that darkens your doorway. When something in the house feels off, we look for what doesn't belong. But what if nothing is wrong with the thing itself? What if it's only where we placed it? He planted the tree with love, with memory, with devotion. It wasn't invasive, it didn't grow wild. It simply responded to where it was put, stretching to shield, to stay close, to hold. And yet, its presence slowly changed the rhythm of everything around it. Not because it was a bad tree, but because it stood in the path meant for breath. This is the soft truth few want to hear. Not everything that's dear to us belongs in the center. Sometimes the things we treasure most become obstacles, not from malice, but from misplacement. In Feng Shui, placement is not decorative, it's destiny. A mirror hung too low can reflect sorrow instead of light. A bed pushed into a corner can trap rest instead of inviting it. And a tree, no matter how cherished, if planted directly before the door, can unknowingly block the arrival of every good thing we've been praying for. But how could we know? We hold onto objects because they anchor us. After loss especially, we cling to his favorite hat still on the hook, to her teacup still by the sink, to the tree planted on the day everything changed. We don't do this to preserve pain, we do it to preserve presence. But presence needs air, it needs openness. And when remembrance turns into blockage, the very thing we thought was holding us is the thing keeping us from moving. This doesn't make the tree wrong, it makes the placement out of rhythm. The soul of the house begins to resist in quiet ways. The air doesn't circulate well. The door creaks but never opens fully. People stop coming by. Even the birds seem to fly past more than they land. The house is no longer welcoming or closed. It just waits in a half state of pause. You feel it too. A wait when you return home. A breath you don't take until you're in another room. A memory that makes you smile, then sigh, then forget why you even walked outside. One woman, after months of unexplained tiredness, was told by her daughter, "Maybe it's not your body. Maybe the house is too full." At first, she was offended. "I only have what I need," she said. But later that evening, she walked through the rooms one by one and realized something. Everything she kept had meaning, but not everything had movement. A scarf on a chair for 6 years. A dried bouquet that no longer smelled of anything but dust. A table covered in objects too precious to touch. The energy was not wrong, it was stuck. And that's the heart of it, stuckness. When we keep objects in places meant for passage, when we fill the middle instead of the corners, when we place memory where light should enter, we unknowingly trade presence for preservation. But healing doesn't ask us to throw things away. It simply asks us to move them with love. That's all the grandson suggested when he came home after so long. Maybe we just move the tree a little, just enough to let the light reach the porch again. Not cut, not remove. Just reposition, so the house could breathe again, so memory could still live there, but not in the doorway. And something shifted the moment they did. Sunlight touched the front steps. The wind returned. The silence became thinner. His grandfather stood in that new light and said nothing, but his shoulders lowered, as if a weight he couldn't name had finally lifted. Because space is never just space, it is alignment. And the things we love most must be placed where they can serve, not suffocate. So if you are holding onto something, a piece of the past, a symbol of love, a plant, a gift, a memory, and you're wondering why life hasn't flowed easily through your home, ask yourself, is it possible that it's not the thing, but the place? And if so, can you move it just slightly, so light can return, so energy can pass, so love can remain, but not at the cost of breath? 7. Don't let your door become a sealed mouth. Every house has a face, and every face has a mouth. The front door is that mouth, not in metaphor, but in energy. It is where breath enters, where fortune finds its way in, where greetings begin and goodbyes soften. But somewhere along the years, you stopped treating it that way. You stopped opening it in the morning. You started using the side door more often. You placed a shelf there, a shoe rack, maybe an umbrella stand that grew dusty and unnoticed. It wasn't intentional, it just happened. Slowly, quietly. And now the mouth of your house is closed. In Feng Shui, when the front door is blocked, everything slows. It's the first place where Kai, vital energy, makes contact. A door that opens with ease, that breathes in light and welcomes wind, invites flow. A door that creaks, stays closed too long, or hides behind clutter sends a different signal. Not now, not here. You may not hear the message. But life does. You notice it in subtle ways. Money comes in but doesn't stay. Conversations begin but fade halfway. Visitors seem uncertain even when welcomed. There's no hostility, just hesitation. Something feels muted. You may wonder why things feel stuck when you're working so hard. Why effort seems greater than outcome. Why inspiration doesn't land like it used to. Why even gratitude feels thinner these days. The answer might not be inside your heart, but at your door. Walk up to it. Stand there the way a stranger would. What do you see? Is the mat crooked? Are the steps cracked? Is there dust on the doorknob? When's the last time your own hand reached out to that handle without urgency, just to open and let the day in? This is not about superstition. It's about breath. Just as your own body suffers when your mouth is clenched, your home struggles when its door stays shut too long. One morning, a woman in her 60s opened her front door after months of using only the side. The light hit her face like an old friend she'd stopped calling. The breeze slipped inside, touching nothing but leaving its scent. She stood there doing nothing, just watching the light shift across the floor. Later that week, an old friend called. "I was thinking about visiting," she said. "Do you mind?" She didn't know why she smiled so fully. But maybe the house had said yes before she did. When you open the front door, you're not just inviting others in. You're allowing opportunity to knock without obstruction. Your door speaks to the world, not with words, but with readiness. When it's clean, clear, and used with intention, it tells the universe, "I am here. I am available. I am open to receive." But when it is hidden, heavy, or blocked, it whispers, "Leave blessings at the gate. I'm not ready." And so many of us live behind sealed mouths. We mean well, we're just busy, or tired, or unaware. But the good news is the house remembers. Clean the step, sweep the threshold, oil the hinges. Touch the handle like you would a sacred object. Place a small symbol of invitation nearby, a plant that leans toward the sun, a soft-colored stone, a wind chime that sings quietly when someone arrives. Let the mouth of your house breathe again, because when it does, so will you. 8. The first bell of healing. The first sound was barely a whisper. A soft chime, thin and golden, like someone had touched the air with a fingertip. It happened just after noon when the breeze crept in from the back hills, quiet and almost unsure. The wind chime, newly hung by the door, moved once. No fanfare, no melody, just a single note, but it was enough. The house, which had long held its breath, seemed to shift, not visibly, not dramatically, but inwardly, deeply. As if it had been waiting for that exact vibration to remember itself. Sound awakens space, not noise, not volume, but resonance. The kind of sound that isn't just heard but felt. A bowl struck gently, a bell rung with care. A voice that says softly, "I am here again." In homes that have gone too long without music, without laughter, without words spoken aloud, the silence hardens. It coats the walls, it seeps into corners. It replaces comfort with a kind of pause so still, it becomes mistaken for normal. Until one day, something rings and the space remembers. He hadn't planned to buy a chime. It was his grandson's idea. "Just something small," the boy said, placing it in his hands. "Not for decoration, for the house to wake up." He didn't argue, he didn't fully understand, but he hung it anyway near the front door beneath the edge of the old tiled roof. That first sound opened something. He didn't cry, he didn't speak. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching the way the afternoon light bent around the sound. He hadn't realized how quiet it had become until it wasn't quiet anymore. Because sometimes the first sign of healing is a sound. A rustle, a breath, a ring. In Feng Shui, sound clears stagnation. It doesn't drive energy out, it invites it to move. Bells are often used to soften heavy corners, to stir motion where dust has gathered, to remind space that it is still alive. In temples, the bell is not just ritual, it is renewal. And your home, though not a temple, is a sacred place, one that has perhaps forgotten its own pulse. Sound brings it back, not through loud music or forced cheer, but through tone. A bowl that hums softly, a chime that greets the breeze. A whisper spoken to no one in particular. He began speaking aloud more after that day. Simple things. Good morning. There you are. Thank you for staying. The house didn't answer, not in words, but the floors didn't creak as harshly. The kitchen didn't feel so cold. The night air felt less like loneliness and more like softness. His grandson noticed. "It feels warmer here now," he said one evening as they brewed tea. "Like the house is listening." And perhaps it was. Because sound, when given with care, becomes presence. It asks nothing. It demands nothing. It simply says, this space matters enough to be heard. If your home has fallen too quiet, not by choice but by neglect, start with one sound. Strike a bell in the hallway. Run water in a bowl and listen to it settle. Open a window and invite the wind to speak. Place a small instrument, wind, chime, bell, wooden block, by the entrance. Use it not for show, but for calling the space back to itself. In one home, a woman lit a candle and rang a small brass bell 3 times each morning. She didn't know if it worked, but the air felt different by the second week. She found herself humming again, folding laundry with rhythm, catching the breeze as it stirred the curtains. She said nothing about it, but the house had changed. And so had she, because healing is never loud at first. It begins in a single tone, repeated gently until the whole space aligns to its vibration. Let your home hear you. Let it sing with you, not for guests, not for show, but because every breath you offer it becomes an invitation for life to return. And sometimes, all it takes is one bell. Final. No one noticed the exact day the house began to breathe again. It didn't announce itself with change. No grand gesture. No sudden light. Just the slow return of rhythm, footsteps that didn't feel hesitant, air that moved without asking permission, morning sunlight slipping further into the room than it used to. He began waking up with the breeze. Not early, not late, just when it felt right. The tree still stood in the garden, but not in the way anymore. The door opened more easily. The silence that had once clung to the corners now held warmth, not weight. Even the way the wind touched the curtains had changed, gentler somehow, but more certain. And still nothing really changed. The walls were the same, the table, the teapot, the cracked tiles in the hallway, but something beneath it all had shifted. Not the form, but the feeling. He started wiping the glass without needing a reason, not because it was dirty, but because it felt like the right thing to do. Like making space, like clearing a path for something unseen. Some days he sat in silence, just listening, to the bell, to the leaves, to the space between sounds, and it felt like prayer, not the kind you speak, the kind you live. You don't need to understand everything about energy to feel when it returns. Sometimes all it takes is a moment of softness, a curtain drawn, a breath remembered, a hand rested on the wall as you pass without rushing. Perhaps that is how homes heal, not with noise, but with presence. And perhaps if you listen closely enough, your own house is whispering the same question. Is it time to let the light back in?